I'm going to read you a quote from Ernest Becker's Denial of Death.
Yes.
The idea of death, the fear of it, haunts the human animal like nothing else. It is a mainspring of human activity, designed largely to avoid the fatality of death, to overcome it by denying it in some way that is...
Excuse me, can that be fatality? Must be finality. Unless it's a tautology. Death is fatal by definition.
The fatality of death.
I think it must be finality.
I'll start.
So that's the way I am. Well, I don't know.
I guess the important part is that they try to deny it. Deny in some way that it is the final destiny
yes.
of man. Do you fear death? And how do you deal with that knowledge? How do you...
I've just had the experience of reading about my own death in a catalogue from the National Portrait Gallery in London of a set of photographs about a group of us who were once, well, still are, the survivors, friends in London in the 70s. And the catalogue came and it was a caption featuring me and it said, "The late Christopher Hitchens." And I thought, well, there is a few words in print that will one day certainly be true, but for now I'm not late, mate. So, and I've even worked out how it happened. A good friend of mine named Pat Kavanagh, she was the wife of the novelist Julian Barnes from Literary Agent, died while the thing was going to press. So they hastily put in the late against her name, and it was the next page, and they put it against mine instead. But her husband, Julian Barnes, had just published a wonderful book called Nothing to be Frightened of. Long meditation on death itself, and his wife had just died of brain cancer. So, and on the day I saw this catalogue, I just had his answer to my letter of condolence. So they offered to pulp all the copies, but I said, no, I want at least a dozen of them. And, by the way, I also have a perfect opening paragraph now for my memoirs. Right. So, you see, one can be positive about these things. The way I think about it is this. I think it's actually T.E. Lawrence who says this, that many men would take the death sentence that's offered to them by fate easily in preference to the life sentence that could be offered with the other hand. In other words, if you think, hell, here's this party, I'm at it, it's a good party, and at some point someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, not that I have to leave, that would be bad enough, but the party's going to go on without you. That's the bad bit. It's the newspaper that comes out the day after that I won't read. That's it. But then, nobody doesn't have that. But then picture the opposite. You're tapped on the shoulder, say, great party, yeah, I'm having a great time. Well, you can't leave. You have to stay. And it's going on forever. No, you then know right away. Don't be silly. It's not even something you should or would subconsciously desire to happen. The idea of being dead and then resurrected seems therefore rather pointless. I mean, why die at all? What's the point of inflicting that on you? Of course you have to die. Why? Oh, so you can have eternal life. Oh, I see. Really, this really is child's play, I think, in the literal sense. It's designed to both frighten children and impress them, perhaps console them. But all of these things are fables for people with childlike brains.
That kind of touches on the next question, which is, there are some scientists who say that aging is a disease that can eventually be cured. They believe that humankind can conquer death. And I guess you've already answered this, but the possibility of living forever, would that be something that would interest you? Even if it weren't under a celestial dictator, if you said maybe just this party that you enjoy, perhaps on this earth.
I'm sure, well, we already know, it's happened in my own lifetime, that the advance of death can be fended off somewhat and palliated, but there's no possibility that it could be abolished. In any case, suppose that were to be true, even to a limited extent, it's not going to save the planet from heating up and not for whatever reason you think it's happening. I know in any case, because of the temperature of the surface of the sun, I know this from Lawrence Krauss, who's the greatest physicist on the subject, that within measurable time the Earth's surface will be the same, that temperature will be the same as that of Venus. In other words, too hot to support life. And we know other things about the system, and we know now that ever since the first instant of the Big Bang, every second, a star the size of our sun is blown up, and while we've been talking, it's happened to hundreds of such. So it's all nonsense to talk about eternal life. It would be more persuasive in a way if people could think of a good idea of heaven, but it's very funny that they haven't, unless it's a replication of obvious frustrations and conquest of those on earth, as in the Muslim case. But the Christians, for example, have never been able to produce a cogent idea of paradise. That must tell you something. They only do hell convincingly.
You've written that the pleasures and rewards of the intellect are inseparable from angst, uncertainty, conflict, and even despair. This seems paradoxical. Everything you love about civilization springs out of a brain that you've criticized as being poorly engineered.
Yes.
Our adrenal glands are too big and our prefrontal lobes are too small.
Penis is too capricious. All that.
As we learn more and more about the brain and how to manipulate it, would you be interested in being the architect of your own evolution? In other words, would you, if possible, change or control the outdated reptilian parts of your brain?
Not if they'd take away the angst. No. I wouldn't. I mean, sometimes Buddhists, as well as monotheists, will say to you, well, if you'd only accept, there'd be bliss and nirvana and end to pain and strife. And I said, well, I don't believe you could supply that at all. But if you did, I don't want it. What you offer is not worth having. So not at that price. But on the other hand, I am now 61, and I'm sure I could be very interested in the idea of taking part in an experiment to see if what we know is happening anyway, the further evolution of our brains, humanity is not the last word from this point of view. We know it's happening. And we know, a very arresting statement made by Sir Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal, Professor of Cosmology at Cambridge. I heard him say this once at a lecture. The Earth is about halfway through its natural life. We can't stop thinking of ourselves as the object of evolution that began with bacteria. When our sun burns out, if there are any creatures to watch it happening, they won't be human. They'll be as far from us as we are from bacteria. To take a small part in advancing that process, peering a little further, I wouldn't mind. But I always measure these things against these tremendously impressive superimposing facts about the cosmos and about evolution, which is a millimetrical process.
Great.
I'm afraid. I mean, it just in the last few centuries, it seems there've been just a few little. I mentioned it a couple of times in my book, and there's more now about brain evolution. It is happening. Will happen. And it's funny because they do seem to take the form of improvements, or at least good adaptations. That we can't lose the idea that somehow there is an upward curve. But that's probably an illusion. Best to live without illusions.